You're standing in the dealership on a Saturday afternoon, and the truck is sitting there under the fluorescent lights like it was waiting for you. $70,000. You've done well. You can afford the payment. The salesman already knows you can afford the payment because you're wearing the watch and the shoes and the confidence of someone who just got promoted. You sign. You drive it home. Your neighbor sees it in the driveway and nods, the way men nod when they approve of a purchase they wish they'd made. And right there, in that moment, you feel like you've arrived. But there's a number attached to that truck that nobody in the dealership mentioned. Not the sticker price, not the interest rate, not even the insurance premium. A number so large and so slow moving that it won't show up for 30 years. And when it finally does, it won't look like a truck at all. It'll look like the retirement you didn't get to have. That number is somewhere north of $1 million, and you're not going to believe how it gets there. Not yet. We'll get to the math. But the math isn't the interesting part. The interesting part is why you bought the truck in the first place and what it was actually purchasing. Because it wasn't transportation. You already had transportation. The thing you were buying doesn't have a window sticker. Let's talk about what money actually does when you spend it. Not in the moment, but across time. Because most people think of a purchase as a single event. You hand over dollars, you receive a thing, transaction complete. But that's not how money works. That's how shopping works. Money operates on a different axis entirely. Money is time. Not metaphorically, literally. Every dollar you spend today is a dollar that will never compound. And a dollar that never compounds is not $1 lost. It's the entire future that dollar would have built, erased. Think of it like a river. A wide, slow-moving river that starts with a single stream somewhere in the mountains. That stream is your income. Every month, water flows in, and every month, you get to choose where to direct it. Some of it goes to the things you need, some of it goes to the things you want, and some of it, if you're intentional, gets redirected into a reservoir upstream, where it sits and gathers and feeds back into itself, growing wider every year without you having to carry a single extra bucket. That reservoir is your invested wealth. And the thing about reservoirs is they don't just hold water, they generate it. Rain falls on the surface, tributaries feed in from the sides, the water level rises not because you're pouring more in, but because the system itself produces momentum. That's compounding. That's what money does when you leave it alone long enough. But every time you pull water out of the reservoir to irrigate something downstream, something shiny, something impressive, something that sits in your driveway and makes the neighbors nod, you're not just losing the water you pulled, you're losing every gallon that water would have attracted over the next 3 decades. The truck isn't a truck. The truck is a hole in your reservoir. And the water that leaks through that hole doesn't just disappear. It evaporates, silently, invisibly, while you're polishing the chrome. Here's where it starts to get uncomfortable. Because this isn't really about trucks. Trucks are just the version of the problem that's easy to see. The real problem is the pattern underneath. The pattern that says, you've earned this. You work hard. You make good money. You deserve to spend some of it on things that feel like progress. And nobody can argue with that logic. It sounds airtight. It sounds like something a reasonable, successful adult would say. But watch what that logic actually does over a career. You get your first real job. You buy a car that matches the job. You get promoted. You move to an apartment that matches the promotion. You get married. You buy a house that matches the marriage. You have kids. You buy the SUV that matches the kids. Each upgrade feels earned. Each one feels proportional. And each one, quietly, invisibly, resets the floor of your life one level higher. And floors don't come back down. That's the part no one warns you about. Every lifestyle upgrade you make isn't a one-time celebration. It's a permanent increase in the cost of being you. The nicer house isn't just a bigger mortgage this month. It's a bigger mortgage every month for 30 years. The truck isn't just a payment. It's insurance, fuel, maintenance, registration, the pressure to keep it looking the way it looked the day you drove it home. All of it recurring. All of it compounding in the wrong direction. You're sitting across from someone at dinner. They make roughly what you make, maybe a little less. They drive something forgettable. They live in a house that's fine but not impressive. They don't talk about money. They don't seem stressed. And you can't figure out why they seem so relaxed all the time. Not happy in a performative way, just calm. Like they know something the room doesn't. What they know is this: they never raised their floor. Not because they couldn't, because they understood what the floor actually costs. Not in dollars per month, but in years of their life. And this is the part most people never calculate, because no one teaches you to calculate it. When you spend $70,000 on a vehicle, you're not spending $70,000. You're spending what that $70,000 would have become. If you invested $70,000 at age 35 in a broad market index fund, earning a historical average of roughly 10% annually, by the time you're 65, that single sum would have grown to over $1.2 million. One truck, one decision, one Saturday afternoon at a dealership. $1 million gone. But it's worse than that. Because you didn't pay $70,000 in cash, you financed it. At 6 or 7% interest over 5 or 6 years, you paid closer to $82,000 when you include the interest. And during those 5 years of payments, every monthly installment was money that wasn't being invested. At $1,000 a month in payments for 6 years, that's $72,000 in payments alone, each one of which had its own compounding future that was quietly extinguished. The full opportunity cost of that truck, including the financing, the insurance premiums over a decade of ownership, the fuel, the maintenance, the depreciation that cut the value in half before the loan was even paid off, the total real cost stretches past $1.3 million in lost future wealth. For a vehicle that will be worth $8,000 by the time you retire. You read that and something in you resists it. That can't be right. That's exaggerated. Nobody thinks about money that way. And you're correct. Nobody does think about money that way. That's the entire problem. The system is designed to make you think in monthly payments, not lifetime costs. The dealership doesn't show you a chart of compound growth. The bank doesn't say, "This loan will cost you $1 million in retirement." Your friends don't say, "Nice truck, but you just delayed your financial freedom by a decade." Everyone around you is optimizing for the same thing, the monthly number, because the monthly number is the one that feels manageable. And manageable is the word people use when they've stopped asking whether something is wise. Now let me show you what happens inside someone who starts to see this. Not the math, the shift. Because the math is just confirmation. The shift is what actually changes your life. There's a moment, and it doesn't happen all at once. It accumulates. You're looking at a purchase, something you would have bought without thinking 2 years ago, and you feel something new. Not guilt, not restriction, something closer to clarity. You see the price tag, and almost involuntarily your mind translates it, not into what it costs today, but into what it costs in freedom. That $400 a month payment isn't $400. It's the ability to take 3 months off between jobs without fear. That new kitchen renovation isn't $30,000. It's the difference between retiring at 58 and retiring at 63. You stop seeing purchases as rewards. You start seeing them as trades. And once you see them as trades, you can't unsee it. Every dollar has 2 futures. The one where it's spent and gone, and the one where it's invested and growing. And you get to choose every time. But here's what makes this so powerful and so dangerous at the same time. Once you internalize this, your relationship with status completely restructures. You start noticing things about the people around you that you never noticed before. The colleague with the expensive lease who can't take a pay cut to switch careers. The friend with the renovated house who hasn't contributed to her retirement account in 4 years. The family member with the boat who quietly took on a second credit card. They're not bad with money. They're fluent in the language of lifestyle. They just never learn the grammar of optionality. And optionality, that's the word that changes everything. Because wealth isn't what you have. Wealth is what you can survive. Wealth is the number of bad options you can absorb without panic. Losing a job, a medical bill, a market crash, a divorce, a recession, an industry that disappears. How many of those can you walk through without your life collapsing? That's your real net worth, not the number on a screen. The number of catastrophes between you and desperation.
The person driving the $70,000 truck has narrowed that margin. Not because the truck is evil, but because the truck represents a choice that prioritized identity over insulation, looking successful instead of being secure. And the gap between those two things is where most financial suffering lives. Here's what changes when you widen that gap instead of narrowing it. You negotiate differently, not with aggression, with calm, because you don't need this deal. You don't need this client. You don't need this job. You want it, maybe, but need is gone. And the absence of need changes your voice, your posture, your willingness to wait. You become the person in the room who can afford silence. And silence, in negotiation, in career decisions, in life, is the most expensive asset there is. You can't buy it at a dealership. You can only build it by not buying things at dealerships. Your patience changes, not as a virtue, as a strategy. You can wait for the right opportunity because you're not bleeding cash every month into obligations that demand constant income. You can say no to the wrong job. You can hold through a market downturn instead of panic selling because your monthly expenses aren't pressing against your throat. You can take a year to build something instead of needing it to pay off in 90 days. Time becomes a tool instead of a threat. This is what the person with the forgettable car understood. They weren't sacrificing. They were buying something invisible, something the world doesn't reward with compliments or nods of approval. They were buying the ability to not care, not in a reckless way, in a structural way. They arranged their finances so that the opinions of others, the expectations of the market, the pressure of their employer, none of it had leverage over them. And leverage, once you lose it, is almost impossible to get back. Here's where most people fail, even after they see all of this, even after the math clicks, even after the feeling shifts. They make one critical error and it undoes everything. They try to fix the past instead of redesigning the future. They sell the truck at a loss. They slash their lifestyle overnight. They announce their new philosophy to everyone around them. And within 6 months, the friction of sudden change pushes them right back to where they were. Because deprivation isn't sustainable. Performance isn't sustainable in either direction. What's sustainable is a slow, quiet, almost invisible reduction in the cost of being you. Not dramatic, not announceable, just a gradual widening of the gap between income and need, month after month, until the reservoir is deep enough to generate its own current. The other mistake is more subtle and more destructive. It's the belief that you'll start later, that the next raise will be the one you invest, that once the kids are older, once the house is paid off, once things settle down. Things don't settle down, and compound interest doesn't wait.
The gap between starting now and starting in 5 years isn't 5 years. It's the entire exponential curve that those 5 years would have initiated. The money you invest at 35 works for 30 years. The money you invest at 40 works for 25. Same contribution, radically different outcome. Time is the only variable you can't negotiate with, and it penalizes delay more severely than almost any financial mistake you can make. That truck is still in your driveway. The payment comes out on the 15th of every month. The insurance renews in March. The tires need replacing next winter. And somewhere in a parallel version of your life, the one where you bought the used sedan and invested the difference, there's an account growing at 10% a year, untouched, unannounced, compounding in the kind of silence that eventually becomes deafening. You don't have to sell the truck. That's not what this is about. This is about the next truck, the next kitchen, the next upgrade that feels earned because you worked hard and you deserve it. You do deserve it. That was never the question. The question is what it actually costs. Not today, not this month. In the retirement you haven't met yet. In the options you won't have. In the silence you can't afford because your life is too expensive to be quiet. The $70,000 truck doesn't cost $70,000. It never did. It cost the future you thought you were building while you were busy looking successful in the present. And the only person who knows what that future was worth is the version of you who won't get to live it.